reducing regulatory burdens and cutting red tape has to form part of any ambitious growth strategy. The OECD estimates that around half of all regulation across the member states originates in Brussels. So excessive and unnecessary regulation at the European level has a dramatic effect. It holds back enterprise and it stifles growth and job creation. In the global race, the European Union is competing against low tax, low regulation economies. And these have to be our benchmark. And that is the context for the Prime Minister's speech earlier this year when he challenged Europe to become an outward-looking, competitive economy. Taking action to reduce the burden of EU regulation on business, therefore, has never been more important. As the Minister responsible, I am pushing the European Union to create a new regulatory framework which fosters competitiveness, sustainable growth and jobs. That means a leaner, less bureaucratic European Union, relentlessly focused on helping member states to compete. Now, it doesn't, of course, mean simply reducing regulation for the sake of it. There are areas where we support more regulation at the European level, where we want to remove outstanding barriers inside the internal market. But what we have to do is bear down on the unnecessary costs to business from European regulation, especially on the smallest businesses. I'm announcing today that we are strengthening the transposition principles to make clear that all European legislation must be implemented in the least burdensome way possible. From today, a new principle, a sixth principle, has been added that requires ministers to transpose only the minimum necessary to comply with each directive, ensuring that we do not go beyond the minimum requirements of the EU measure that is being transposed. And I can tell you that I intend to block any new legislative proposals from my colleagues across Whitehall that do not meet all six of these transposition principles, or that gold plate EU legislation in any way, unless it can be proved to me that adding more would actually benefit business.
Yes. Thank you. Philip Sack from the Institute of Directors, so I advise the Institute in the area of employment law. And thank you, Minister, for your efforts in this area, and we wish you well with them. I wanted to just give a brief example, or a question about gold plating. Give a brief example of that in the legislation on agency workers. And someone early on mentioned how UK law often uses far more words than the directive. And I looked at the way the UK had implemented the definition of pay in the directive. You've got to give equal pay to agency workers. 760 words. Compare that with the Irish legislation, 73 words. My heroes in this area are the Irish. I must admit, when I read your document, Gold Plating Review, last month, and it said there was no gold plating in the last 18 months, my eyebrow did raise slightly, knowing that example of the Agency Workers Directive. That was my point. My question, do you have any plans to review the stock of existing legislation implementing EU directives? Obviously, you're talking about not gold plating future directives, but do you have any plans to look at the existing stock to review gold plating that's already there?
Fine. Well, thank you for the example of the Agency Workers Directive. And I don't think we should be surprised that the Irish are concise about these things. I will have a look at that. I'm not sure when the Agency Workers Directive was actually adopted.
2011, October.
Right, within the 18-month period.
Was, yes.
Right, okay, we will double check that and see whether there was any gold plating there. But as I made clear, yes, we are going backwards now. We're going back through the stock of directives that have been implemented, specifically to look for examples. Not so much where there may have been gold plating, which would be too late to reverse, but where we failed to take advantage of discretions and flexibilities that were available when the directive was originally passed, and which are still available to us. That's the purpose of our trawl back through the stock.
You mentioned Angela Merkel, and I was just wondering, since you obviously need allies in your attempt to roll back a regulation, are you happy with the level of support that you're receiving from Angela Merkel and her government right now, or would you hope her to be more supportive? What precisely would you like to see from the German government?
Well, so far as Germany is concerned, they have signed our letter. They're one of the 12 member states that do support us, and have supported us on our individual initiatives, and I think also have some of the arrangements that we have here domestically. For example, Germany has an independent watchdog. One of our key demands of the Commission is that they make their impact assessment process not only mandatory but fully independent. Here in Britain we have the Regulatory Policy Committee. When a minister says the cost of my regulation is going to be 80 million, but I'm taking out another regulation that costs business 100 million, those two figures are independently assessed and verified by our Regulatory Policy Committee, which is completely independent of government and ministers and publishes its own assessment. Now, Germany has that kind of independent watchdog, and we want to see the same kind of thing operate in Brussels. There is an impact assessment unit, but it isn't fully mandatory, and it certainly isn't independent. It's inside the Commission, and I think that's something we need to address with German help. But on this agenda, yes, I think Germany certainly supports the kind of reforms we're putting forward to make Europe as a whole more competitive.